Helen, it's so great to be with you today. First off, obviously, colleagues here at Microsoft, but what I love about this virtual world is that I continue to get to meet great leaders across our business and learn from them. So, really looking forward to our conversation today. But what really sparked my interest, I know you recently wrote a book that's coming soon called Love Your Team, a survival guide for sales managers in a hybrid world. So, very near and dear to my heart, and so really eager to dive into this conversation. Can you tell us what the book is about?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, by the way, for having me on your podcast. I appreciate the opportunity. So the book is about really what I think are the critical conversations and skills that sales managers need to have with their teams to be successful in a remote and hybrid world. So what I came to see is that there's a lot of conversation about, well, if we can't see our teams, how do we know that they're really working? And I was actually giving a keynote at a conference in July of 2021 and talking about retaining talent. And when I got to the slide about what sales managers need to do to retain talent, because of the talent shortage and sellers leaving and they can write their own ticket, what I put on the slide was love your team. And I was pretty nervous about it. And I go, look, I know the L word, love, isn't appropriate in a business context. I know it's kind of weird, but when I was preparing for this keynote, I was like, what do I put down? Support your team, care about your team. And what was true for me was that the sentiment that sales managers need to have to retain their talent is they need to love their team. And it resonated with the audience. And, so that was great feedback. And at the break, I got questions. Well, how do you go about doing that? You talked about supporting your team on their terms, helping them with their career, but can you break it down a bit more? And as I reflected on what you actually need to do, I realized that I had a book inside of me to write because of the 25 plus years experience managing teams, and most of them remote. And so this may sound kind of trivial, I don't know, but at its core, the book is the 17 conversations that sales managers need to master with their sellers, with their team, in order to be successful. And then there's a intro where I give the context about how the world has changed, and then I talk about skills needed. But when you break it down, what I realized is the bulk of my time as a sales leader is having conversations with my team, whether it's forecast calls. So I've broken those 17 conversations down into 5 categories. And the first category, as an example, is called conversations of connection. So when you're a brand new sales manager or you move to a new role, you inherit a team. Very seldom do you get to build your team from scratch. So the first conversation in the conversations of connection is all about how do you introduce yourself to your team and how do you set yourself on a good path to build trust and connection. So that's what the book is about. That's a long-winded answer, I know, but that's what it's about.
I love it, Helen. Look, first off, so many interesting parallels. I have a lot of passion for sales leadership and also for what's called social selling. And I started doing it a long time ago when it was kind of an anomaly. And now it's part of selling because we have such a hybrid touch point. There's not as much face-to-face interaction, whether it's with our customers or with our teams. And I, like you, I had a remote team years ago when I was first leading. But now, this isn't something that I think a lot of people were necessarily trained upon. And we're trained as leaders. First off, a sales leadership role, while it isn't always treated as such, is really one of the most important roles that there is, because you set the tone for how your team is going to act, how they feel supported, What is the culture of that team? You put it all in motion, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes into that. And I think we're trained to control what we can control. And when we lack control, as in I can't meet face to face with someone, or I'm not, I don't have a clear opportunity to meet with them on a regular basis, a lot of times people's area of control turns into what we call micromanagement. Now, personally, I think the term is sometimes overused because micromanagement is excessive attention to small details, and performance is not a small detail. But when we're constantly checking up on people, or like, hey, I noticed you weren't at your desk for an hour, like what's going on? Like, oh my goodness, that is not going to set the tone for success. We've got to, as you said, we've got to create a culture that attracts and retains talent. Leadership is all about people and process. We need to understand the why of the people that were there. So it's kind of that first conversation, that connect point, and really find the ways to invest in their day-to-day, but also show that you're invested in their career and getting them where they want to be. So there's a lot of sales managers that are probably watching this right now. What would they get? What are they going to get most of out of this book?
Yeah, so it'll, I think, spark some new ideas. And, for example, when I introduce myself to my team, I have 3 slides. One is all about kind of me, so they can get to know me, what's my beverage of choice, or where do I like to travel in my career. My second slide is my leadership approach and philosophy. So I don't know if all your listeners have established or created a leadership approach and philosophy. So I put in the book what mine is, culture and people first, clear expectations, teaming, no surprises, things like that. I want to, if there's bad news, I want to know. And then my third slide is what's next? What's the next step on how I'm going to interact with you, kind of rhythm of connection, and what do you need to do to be prepared, which is nothing, just show up to our first one-on-one. So I'm not sure if everyone who's listening, all sales managers, have thought about their leadership style. That might be something that they'd reflect on. There also might be ideas of things that they could do. So every conversation chapter is the same format. So for example, at the start is here's what traditional sales managers would do, and here's what love your team sales managers would do. So contrast and compare. And by the way, I should say up front, this book is not sales techniques, closing techniques. It's really about connecting with your team and building a high performance team with a strong culture so that people are motivated to stay. Anyway, let me get back to the chapter structure. So a compare and contrast, and then the purpose of the conversation. How do you know that the conversation is needed? How to conduct the conversation, how do you know it was successful, and then kind of some things to consider, thoughts to consider, or considerations. And so, for example, one of the chapters is about performance management, or actually one of the sections is about conversations of performance. And, you've got to set clear expectations, outcome-based expectations, because if you can't see your team, it's not the activity. I don't think it's ever been the activity, even if you can see your team. It's about the outcomes expected. And some of those might be hard and fast, like quota attainment, revenue, and some might be more, softer expectations, like getting into more senior levels in the organization and managing, interacting and managing a team with a great culture and working well across the organization. So I talk about, for example, performance management, and I know that that's not always a popular topic. And frankly, it's one of the conversations I least like to have, but it's necessary. And so maybe there's some nuggets of ideas if someone's faced with an employee that might not be meeting expectations. So that's my hope for that that the audience, the reader, will get something, some ideas out of it. And I've structured it so they can go right to the chapter that resonates or addresses their immediate need. So each conversation literally is a discrete, each chapter is a discrete conversation.
Well, you had me sold at the 17 conversations. I love how thorough and comprehensive this is. I mean, almost like a blueprint or like a roadmap or a guidebook. If I'm a sales manager, it sounds like for just about every scenario, whether it's setting the table for success, building a team, investing in that team, it sounds like all those bases are covered. You know what I find interesting, Helen? I've always been very passionate about people and process. Surround yourself with the right people, invest in people, make everything you do around people, whether it's customers, your team, your leadership. I've got to solve problems for my leadership and always go one step up. Process is also super important. And I think it's key, whether your team is across the country or right in your backyard, you've got to map out strategy with your team. You've got to, sometimes as a leader, you got to roll up your sleeves. You got to get in the trenches. They need to see you willing to do the things that you expect of them, but you've also got to be clear. I love the phrase clear is kind. And you nailed it when you talked about performance management. It's about being very clear, tangible, trackable. Nothing should ever be a surprise. I always make it a point to revisit prior conversations. Say, these are the things we agreed to. Where is this? Are we trending the way we're supposed to be? So things like that matter a great deal, but it all starts with the foundation. I love how you started with your slide deck that you show people, because what I notice helps most with building relationships with my team, things that help people to get to know each other, they go a long way. It's funny. I don't know if you're a fan of The Office. I know a lot of people have watched The Office. Michael Scott, very laughable character, but he carried around slides about all of his customers. And he was always able to read off like, hey, I knew this, how many kids they have, what their names are, their spouses' names. I make notes for myself in my OneNote about different people that I interact with, my team, so that I know how many kids they have, what their names are, all these types of things, so that I can act, I can actively engage instead of, just randomly or never bringing it up. And I had a manager tell me years ago, when you start your team meetings, don't just jump into business. Make sure you start with kind of that personal element. And even on our team meetings, we like to do fun things, like we do what I call a DJ of the week that I actually stole from a prior manager. We recognize greatness, but we do it with outside the box stuff. Every week, somebody who had a great win from the week prior picks a song, and we kick off the meeting with that, and they get to share why it's meaningful to them. So anything that can, where you continue to showcase what matters to you and you give people the opportunity to share what matters to them, that's what makes us all gel. But a lot has changed with the hybrid world, and we'd be remiss not to point that out. What would you say has changed the most around expectations of sellers with the hybrid world?
Well, I think sellers expect their customers to be in the office and that they can go face to face again. And so, customers aren't in the office either. So you've got to be much more deliberate, whether you're managing your team or your team is trying to meet with their customer. Be more deliberate about coordinating, getting together, and meeting face to face. So the big meetings like EBC or what have you. So executive briefing center meetings is just
we're in an acronym-friendly world, aren't we?
I know. So that's one thing. The other thing, too, is I think there's been a lot more recognition on the individual. There's a lot about mental health and stress. And so I do believe that there's more, it's easier to conduct a meeting that is richer in connection remotely than there used to be, because people are more cognizant. And even the tools, if you have some people in a conference room and then others remote, people are more cognizant to include everybody. So I think that some of that awareness has changed. I don't think the fundamentals of sales management, though, have changed. It's really about understanding your team, their expectations, and meeting them where they are and helping them be successful on their terms. But for sales managers, one of the things that for everybody, the power has shifted to talent. You see it was a year ago, the great resignation or reshuffle. Top talent can go wherever they want. So are you as a manager, someone that your talent wants to work for? Are you focusing on them first, which is really all about what my book is about? And can they fulfill their goals, objectives, and have the life they want working for you? So I have a section in the book called Would You Work for You? So it's like, because the sales manager amplifies and can amplify the success of their team. And, I think it's commonly said that people lead managers, not companies. And so it just becomes all the more critical. And if you have your team leaving, you know how disruptive it is. You literally are at risk of not making your quota if you have people leaving and you're not able to, backfill them quickly, or if you do backfill them quickly, it's 3 months and then them ramping and getting to full steam. That's a lot of momentum that's lost. So it's a critical enabler to a manager's success to be able to retain talent.
I love that. And, look, first off, I have an abundance mindset, so I feel like the ways that we engage have actually grown in number of the ways you can engage people with quality. There's no geographical barriers to anything. And, I also believe that if somebody's in a role, they've earned the right to be in that role and do things the way they see fit, unless they prove that they cannot perform doing it their way. And don't get me wrong, look, we set a framework in place. We work with our teams to build strategy and to, ensure that there's agreement on hey, this is the process we want to execute. And you said something super, super important there, Helen, too, that look, the fundamentals of selling and sales leadership, they haven't changed at all. In fact, many people like yourself have been managing remote teams for a long, long time. This is just new to certain people, but we've got to be very cognizant of these fundamentals, as we work to create and nurture culture and also retain talent. I think that's super important. What do you think are some of the most important things in that element in retaining talent?
Well, it's understanding your team, having a personal connection first and foremost, helping them achieve their career goals and ambitions. So that I recently moved on to a new team, and my prior team that I had for 2 years, I'm proud to say that 3 of those team members are now first level managers. So that to me is super satisfying. They wanted to grow. We worked on it. I did things like job shadowing, coaching, a bunch of different things, knowing that was their ambition. And so one of the things to be cognizant of is it's not a bad thing for people to move on and leave your team if that is the direction that they want to take, if you will, to grow and learn. I do think if we're not growing and learning, and if our teams aren't growing and learning, we're at risk of losing them. So we've got to be deliberate about those conversations. Because, as you said, geography is not an issue anymore. So your team members can walk out the door without taking a single step. They can work for any company on the planet. It doesn't have to be in the US. So we're competing for talent globally. And I think that's different than it used to be, because companies put geography and headquarters right co-located with talent. That whole approach is now perhaps a bit outdated because people move around and they can work from anywhere.
You nailed it. And here's the thing. You said earlier in this conversation something that I think is super important around people leave managers. And so that's why our responsibility is so key. Every conversation that I have with my team has a day-to-day lens, what's top of mind for them, what's top of mind for me and for our leadership. I want to be very transparent. I want to be very communicative, but it also has a career lens. Where are we? Are we on the roadmap to where you want to get? And why is it important for us getting people promoted? Because other people are going to want to work for us if that's the case. If I have a track record and a reputation for getting my team promoted, guess what? People who want to move up are going to want to come work for me. And that's great because they're going to come, they're going to be hungry, and they're going to perform well, and they're going to go where they want to go. And then we will bring in more people like that. Why is it important to have a diverse workforce? Same reason. People will want to work for you because your workforce, first off, will be more collaborative and have more diverse perspectives and ideas. But second, it will be indicative of the culture that you want to bring into your team and that you want to continue to perpetually feed. That's the beauty of some of these elements. So a lot of these things have changed, but those elements and the importance of them have not changed at all. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, what skills would you highlight as being most important right now for sellers and for sales managers in the world that we live in and where we're headed?
Yeah, I love that question because it really does have two parts. Managers need to be able to build trust and connection with their sellers. They need to have a relationship where their sellers know that they have that you have their back. And people talk about empathy, and empathy is really understanding what the other person's going through, walking in their shoes. Those kind of skills really do matter because no longer do employees want to go to work and just do a job. They're the whole, a whole person. So they also want to be known by their manager holistically. And so the personal side of an individual matters as much as the work side, if not more, because that's what makes them tick and live. And if you can support that personal side and have that empathy and understanding, it goes a long way. The other thing is sellers also need to be able to build trust and relationship with their customers. What we sell is so complex, it's really hard to understand. And you think of a Tesla, you buy a Tesla, it's a computer on wheels, right? Like you're not going to go, change the oil, well, there's no, but anyway, you're not going to go mess under the hood. And so buyers, when they choose to buy, they're betting their career. They don't want it to be a career limiting move. And so they really have to trust the seller to help them navigate to solve their business challenges. So I also think that the managers, how they treat and interact with their sellers also needs to be repeated and with the customers. We expect that behavior of trust, respect, communication, empathy with our customers as well. And so those skills are gold. They're more important than ever. And I don't think we were talking about that, 5 years ago as much. So while many fundamentals haven't changed, like treat people with respect like you'd want to be treated, I think you just really have to double down on paying attention to the other person or the customer and meeting them where they are and helping, being the one that is able to provide what they need, whether it's a seller needing some work-life balance time or a customer needing a solution and being able to trust you to deliver it.
What I'm hearing is they need to love their team. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hearing genuine and authentic connections, right, across the board. That's what buyers expect from sellers now, like genuinely plug in, add value. Don't just show up to sell, show up to serve. People want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. They want to win. And I think the more we can do as leaders to unlock those wins for customers, for our team, that's how we all win. That's what it's all about. It's not about being the hero. It's about being the hero maker, whether you're making your customer a hero or you're making your team a hero. Sales leaders are also human. And I think now more than ever, we're encouraged to show that. It wasn't like that when I started out as a sales leader. I had to be invincible. and anything less would be held against me. That's not the world we live in now, and I love it. I embrace it, that I can actually be human with my team. Sales leaders exist to remove barriers, to help their team see around corners, and to be their team's biggest cheerleader, their advocate, their evangelist, to understand them so well that they can sell them wherever they want to go. And I think those things are so key. I understand this book comes out on my birthday, November 1st. Where can I get it?
Amazon. It'll be on Amazon November 1st. So we'll have a special, and looking forward to it. So thank you very much. It's so well said in wrapping up the skills. You're very articulate. You're also a great listener, and I appreciate that.
Hey, this was fun for me, Helen. I will legitimately buy this book as soon as it comes out. I'm very interested. I think it's amazing that you've spent the time to put together a comprehensive look at all the conversations that really matter. These things are top of mind, or they should be, for all sales leaders out there. So I hope everybody watching marks their calendar for November 1. Head to Amazon. Let's make Helen a bestseller. And Helen, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. We'll see you soon, I hope.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Take care.